all of that is part of me, part of what I do, part of what I talk about, but it's also led to the creation of this thing called The Boy at the Back of the Class. Now, The Boy at the Back of the Class is a book I wrote in 2017, after about 2.5 years of going out into the field. And it was a book I never intended to write. It's written for children, and it's written for children 7+. But I've just been overwhelmed by how it's been received, not just by children, but their parents and their grandparents, and their teachers and librarians, and how it's been used to mobilise, being used to mobilise. I want to just talk about some of that.
It's wonderful. Everybody.
Oh, Diana, I love you. I have been writing children's stories for a long time. Most of them were about chocolate. I never wrote about refugees in my life. I never went out to refugee camps thinking one day I'm going to write a book about this. That was never the plan. The only reason why I began to go out to refugee camps at all was because of Alan Kurdi, and I'm sure you all know Alan Kurdi's story. So the 3-year-old refugee boy running away from Syria whose body was being picked up from a beach. And up until then, I've been working for human rights charities, but I think Alan Kurdi woke me up as to the absolute failing of our governments and the absolute lack of care, even when it comes to children, even though those children are supposed to be protected by our laws. So his story propelled me to go to the camps. So about 2.5 years after I started going out, I met another little boy who changed my world and led to the creation of this book. For anybody who might pick up a copy, you will see that it's dedicated to a baby called Rayhan, and this is baby Rayhan. And the reason why it's dedicated to him is because the story is my imagining, my ideal imagining of what could happen to a child who enters a UK classroom with absolutely nothing but a backpack to remind him of everything he's lost or been through. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about baby Rayhan because it's so cute. Baby Rayhan is a name that's very bittersweet for me. So the picture that you see there with me with him is my first and last day of ever meeting him or seeing him. I met his mother Zainab when she was 8.5 months pregnant, living in the horrendous conditions that are in Calais and Dunkirk. She was living in a marshy, horrible area, and the first time I saw her, she was trying to look for food in dustbins. She's heavily pregnant. So she had fled Afghanistan, and again, these wars that are going on around the world that we are not hearing about. There are still bombs being dropped in Afghanistan, we're not hearing about any of that. And there are still people fleeing from these areas, we're not hearing about any of that. But Zainab had picked up enough English along her way, and she said she had been to 17 towns and cities in the hopes of trying to get to safety from Afghanistan to Pakistan, and she just kept moving. Because wherever she was going, the towns either being desecrated in some way, or she's been told, get lost, we don't want you here, you don't belong here. You're of the wrong tribe, you speak the wrong language, part of this, part of that, we don't want you here. So she had somehow made it to Calais and Dunkirk, not really knowing where she was going. All she knew was that she had one uncle somewhere in the UK. She didn't know where he was, she didn't have a phone contact with him or anything. So my friends and I saw her, and of course, refugee hospital and be treated. Of course you can't. You'll be charged thousands and thousands of euros. So we realised that she would need a lot of money to have the baby safely. And even if she didn't have it in a hospital, she would need to pay an ambulance to have her baby on an ambulance. They charge you thousands to get on an ambulance. So we rushed back to London. I told all my friends and family about Zainab. Could we please raise as much money to get this baby born safely? We spent 2 weeks fundraising, raised about 4,500, rushed back out, really proud of ourselves to give this money to the Refugee Women's Centre, who I work with, who would then take care of her medical costs. But when we landed and when we made our way to Zainab, we found that Rayhan had been really naughty and he'd been born a week early. And he was safe and sound, and we were really, really happy with that, really, really proud of that. But this photo that I've taken with him, it was my last moment because just as we were leaving, the camps were being cleared. Has anybody here been to Calais and Dunkirk? So you know about the camp clearances and what that instills and what that provokes, and the anger and the fear that it provokes. So just as we were leaving the camps, waving goodbye, the police were walking in with their tear gas and all the rest of it, and we knew that Zainab wouldn't be there the next time. Maybe she'd move on to another site. But nobody has heard of her, nobody's heard of the baby ever since then. We don't know where they've run away to, we don't know what's happened to them. And even at this stage, where I realised I might never see him again, I didn't think about writing a book about him or anything. It was only about half a year later, when I felt really ill myself. I was very sick, and I was told by the doctors, you might not make it. We'll just be honest with you, you might have 3 months. And the first thing I thought about when I heard those words, you might have 3 months, is, oh my God, what if I never see Rayhan again? What's happened to him? What's going to happen to him? And the questions that I had in my head as to who was going to help him, who was going to understand and respect his story, who was going to want to be his friend and make sure that he was helped as much as possible if he ever made it to the UK, even without Zainab, led to this title popping into my head, The Boy at the Back of the Class. And when I was well enough, and luckily I was saved, I could write, so I could just get up and write again, this story flowed out of me, and I wrote it in 9 weeks, submitted it to an agent that I already had because of the chocolate books, and it sold within 2 weeks. Now I thought if I was really, really lucky, some kids might pick it up and they might want to read it, especially since a lot of our children are very aware of what's going on. They know the word refugee. I did not know the word refugee when I was in primary school, but our kids know, they're very aware of it. And what's happened since the creation of this book is that not only has it gone into kids' hands, it's gone into schools, it's now being part of the curriculum. They're using it, teachers and librarians are using it to teach children empathy and teach children the reality of what refugee children who might walk into their classroom one day have been through. Now, over the last year and a half since this book was published, I've had the honour of going into over 100 schools. I've just did my 134th one on Friday. And when I go into the schools and I talk about quite realistically what's going on in the ground and what I'm seeing. I talk to them about the children that I'm seeing on the ground. I talk to them about Hodder, who's in the purple coat, whose gums were becoming diseased because she was brushing her teeth with dirty water from a puddle. I talk about this little boy, Suleiman. I gave him the name Suleiman. I never knew his name. Who spent his days as a 4-year-old clearing up rubble from the ground to make sure that people could sleep in peace. I talk about the fact that babies that are being born in hostile countries with hostile policies won't ever be given a birth certificate because nobody wants to take ownership of the fact that this baby has been born in their country and therefore is a citizen. But I also talk about the amazing people that I see, and I really think that our media and our children and ourselves are inundated with the stories of what they want us to hear, which is the despair, which is the anger, which is the non-happenings. But what they don't talk to us about is the amazing people who are saving lives every single day. Some of them are here right now amongst us. You're all lifesavers in some way. And I talk to the kids about these amazing people whose names they need to know, but will probably never make it into the history books for all the wrong reasons. So I talk about Caroline, who's just phoned me. She was meant to be here today, but she came down from Calais, but she's a bit sick. But Caroline is just a phenomenal person who heard also about Alan Kurdi's story, rushed out thinking she was going to be there for 2 months, and has refused to leave. She set up the Refugee Women's Centre. Some of you might have met her in Calais and Dunkirk. And she's been on the ground now for 3.5 years, and she refuses to leave until every single woman and child is assisted and they find safety in a home. Charlie Chappers, does anybody know Charlie from the Mobile Refugee Support Team? Oh my God, yes. He's amazing. And he's recognised, just identified so many issues that refugees have with, just simple things like having a mobile phone that's charged, so that if they're ever arrested, they can prove who they are. They can show a police officer who, where they've been, what they've been through, and what they've lost. And I talk about Dorothy over here in the blue coat between myself and Caroline. Now Dorothy, I don't know, does anybody know Dorothy in Calais? So she's known as kind of grandmother of Calais by the refugees. And this lady is phenomenal. She's 74 years old. She is a pensioner. She lives in Belgium, doesn't even live in France. Twice a week without fail, if she can do so, she'll bring down a car filled with nothing but socks. And what she does is she distributes socks to everyone, fresh socks, maybe toothpaste and toothbrush, in the hope that they can keep their feet safe and dry. And she's saving lives by just doing that. And not only that, she takes the smelly, stinky socks and drives back up to Belgium. God knows what her car smells like on the way back home. And washes those socks and mends those socks, and she tags every single one in the hope that she can give that back to the refugee she might see in a couple of days again. And she lives in a tiny flat, which is probably like 1/100th of the size of this room. So across her flat, she just has strings of socks that she's mended and dried. And this woman is a shero. And I want our kids to know about people, amazing people like this. And Ruhi there, has anybody heard of Refugee Bananas Biryani? Yeah. Ruhi also heard about Alan Kurdi, left for Calais and Dunkirk, realised that the refugees were missing the home foods. I mean, how many tins of baked beans can you eat without being sick, especially when it's cold? So she started cooking. She just cooked for hundreds, thousands of people whenever she could. And now she's basically given up her job and is working in Bosnia-Herzegovina, as well as in Greece, as well as in Calais and Dunkirk. She ships out as much as she can, fundraise, and this is all she does now. So when I go to schools, I talk about these guys as well, because they need to know what they can do to be part of this, and how little it can actually take to be a part of something really great. Because each of these people thought, I'm just going to go out and do one thing, and instead what they're doing, that one thing has become bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're saving lives every single day as a result of it. And I also talk to the kids quite realistically about some of the questions that we get as volunteers. Stupid questions, silly questions, like why don't the refugees stay and fight? I show them the pictures that are coming out of, Syria and Yemen. I talk about the fact that the language they're surrounded by is language they need to question. So one of my opening gambits is why I've got Snowy here. Snowy is in the book, so Snowy and Tintin, the narrator loves Snowy and Tintin. And I speak about how Snowy and Tintin was a big influence in my life, because it was the first book I encountered in the library, which featured a character which went on adventures around the world. So there were characters from Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and all these strange, phenomenal characters that I hadn't seen in other books. But I also recognised that Tintin was never afraid to ask questions, and his quest was always to find the truth behind a mystery. He had to solve a mystery, and he was never afraid to go as far as he would need to find the truth. And one of the constant things he does is he questions what he hears, he questions what he reads, what other people are telling him. So I tell all the kids in the school, be like Tintin. Make sure that when you hear the word swarm or the word immigrant and migrant instead of the word refugee, that you are able to ask the questions that your heart might be asking, and to take those questions and verbalize them, because you never know where those questions are going to lead you. As I said, I also talk about the images that they're not seeing in the papers, which will make sure they don't understand why refugees are running away. The children that I'm meeting are very astute as to the bubbles that media creates, social media platforms create for them. So when we talk to them about breaking it and how to break it, they're absolutely intrigued, because they know that they're not hearing the truth. They know they're not hearing the whole picture. So what they often want to know is, how do I go about making sure that I can question that without getting into trouble myself? How can I make sure that I see these pictures, I see these images without getting into trouble? And my answer is always, go and speak about it. Ask your parents, your grandparents, your librarian, your teacher, whoever is in a safe space and has a responsibility to you. Ask the questions that you need to ask of them. So I talk about the fact that I get asked, why don't refugees stay? And I ask them, can you fight this? Can you survive in this? Of course the answer is no. And even if you do survive this, chances are that if you go somewhere and you're injured, thanks to international laws being broken and nobody being called to account, hospitals and schools, which are meant to be safe zones, are also bombed and completely annihilated. So if you're a refugee, if you're a person who's surviving all of this and still deciding to stay, and somehow fight back, that's something it's just not possible for people, for human beings. Now in the book, The Boy at the Back of the Class, just for those of you who, there's no reason why any of you should have read it apart from Diana, who just is amazing, and John, and Gulwala here, hello. It's a very simple story. So it's about a boy who walks into a UK classroom, and the narrator is desperate to be their friend. It's a 9-year-old person who's desperate to be their friend. And when they find out that this boy has been through all of these things for real, they go out of their way on an amazing adventure to try and help him and his family, try and get him reunited with his family. And it involves tackling Buckingham Palace and the Queen and Parliament and all of these kind of big questions that kids might have. And I tell children all the time when I go into the schools that even though the drawings in the books are cartoonish and that they are illustrated and they might make you think they're fictional, they're based on real drawings that children have drawn for us when we have asked them to remember what they remember of their homeland. And when I tell children, please remember that your childhood, that your experience of childhood is so different, so honoured and privileged than what the refugee child bringing in, coming into your classroom might have gone through. The responses are absolutely phenomenal. They want to, the hearts open up, and you can see it literally blossom in front of you. It's so beautiful. And I also talk about the kind of misinformation that we get sold through our media as to where refugees are actually running. So when you hear that the majority of refugees haven't even left their countries, and that only 3% out of 70 million will want to actually stay in the country they've landed in, battling the media rhetoric around these swarms of people coming to take everything we have, it can be dismantled quite easily. All we need are facts. We just need the facts and numbers before us. And we have all of that, but it's never shared. It's never openly shared by the kind of public platforms that we might have. So again, I talk about all of this to the kids, and some of these kids are as young as 6. So they're quite shocked by the fact that this isn't being told to them, that certain words are being used to make sure that this is all covered up. So when we start, talking about this, you just see the kind of why aren't we told all of this? Why is it a certain way that we see refugees? Why are refugees a certain image? And now the other question that I talk to them about, the other thing that I want them to wake up to is that refugees are not alien, they are not other, they are embedded in our stories, in our histories, in everything we do and take for granted. And I'm just going to flash through some of the characters that I talk about with them. Albert Einstein, of course, refugee. I asked them what would we have done as a world if we had told Albert Einstein to go away because he's a refugee, or if Albert Einstein had died at sea, like the thousands of people that we were forcing to die at sea. What if he hadn't been able to get on a passport with on a plane with his passport and land safely and go on to do the amazing things he's done? And all of us who work with refugees will know how brilliant, amazing, skilled the people are sitting before us or standing before us that we are trying to help. I talk about fish and chips. And the fact that this was gifted to us by Portuguese refugees who landed here hundreds of years ago, and we think of as a British dish. I talk about the fact that the Mini Cooper car is also something that was created by a refugee who landed here when he was 16. And again, I asked them what would we have done if we said no to Sir Alec Isagonis and told him to go away when he was 16. I talk about Freddie Mercury and the fact that his name was Farrokh Bulsara, that he landed here fleeing a war, and that he is one of the British godfathers of iconic rock and roll. Again, what would we have done if we had said to him, go away, we don't want you here, you're a refugee? I asked them if they use Google, and of course they do, and the fact that it was co-created by a refugee. Sergey is, I just think public figures like this, figures that they're probably not thinking of or thinking about as a refugee, opens up their minds as to, okay, wow, they're embedded in our lives, we are actually part of this. I also talk about this guy, married to the Queen, and the fact that we never talk about refugees in the monarchy when we talk about refugees and their legacies or their place in society, and the fact that he was evacuated in an orange box, but he's there, right there sitting next to our Queen, but we don't think of him as a refugee. I wonder why that is. I talk about Judith Kerr and just beautiful figures in our literature who have given us so much right up until their deaths. I mean, we lost Judith last year, and up until the last week of her life, she was still speaking publicly about how the UK, how about the EU needs to do more, and how her books are filled with characters that are a little bit strange and unfamiliar, but who just need a friend, even if it's just for a day. And of course, Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, all of these prophets that we, so many people claim to live by, and still they aren't seen as refugees for some reason, even though they spent their lives fleeing. Some of them didn't even make it because they were persecuted to their death. How their refugee stories are still a part of us. I also talk about Superman, also talk about Harry Potter, Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and of course Paddington, and the kids get very excited by Paddington and Superman and all the rest of it. But how the characters that we love, the histories that they give us, all of their experiences, even if they're fictional, are embedded in something quite real. I talk about the fact that Paddington Bear is quite a political bear, that the author created this character after A, his family having sheltered refugees when he was a child, and B, him seeing evacuees being completely sent out into the wilderness, these young children being sent out into the wilderness with nothing to hand, and at a time when Parliament, just as they are doing now, said no to kinder transport. We never talk about the fact that our Parliament actually fought kinder transport for a whole year, that there was a whole movement to make Parliament and MPs take in refugee children from that were fleeing during World War II. So all of that, all of the political aspects of characters or figures that we take for granted, whose gifts we take for granted, I speak about all of that. Now, one of the reactions to the books that have given me so much hope is the fact that children are now pushing their elders to get moving on this. And I never envisioned this for the book at all. And I did a TED talk about this just before Christmas, about how shocked I am that I forgot how amazing children are when it comes to understanding what's right and wrong. Now, children do not see grey areas. They know if you're hurting someone. If you're hurting someone, that is bad. Why are you doing it? Why isn't it being stopped? They don't want to hear the excuses. They don't understand the excuses. And I always wonder, at what point do we start to make the excuses? At what point do we start to say, oh, but, oh, because, oh, this and that? Children don't have that. Now, as a result of the book going out into schools, I get letters literally every week big wads of letters asking me what they can do to help. These are children as young as 6. I have had 98-year-olds writing in, I've had 76-year-olds writing, I've had 17-year-olds writing in. All of them are wanting to know what they can do. And this is one of the biggest gaps we have. We have community, we have a whole country of people here who are hungry to do something, who are as angry as we are and who are as passionate as we are. And we cannot forget that some of them are as young as 5 or 6. They're willing and able to do something about it, no matter how small that something might seem to them. And I just want to read you some of the letters that have been coming in. So I would just want to tell you one story in particular that led to this particular moment just before Christmas. I got a tweet from a teacher from somewhere in the middle of Kent, so a very picturesque village area where there's not a single refugee child or a single brown child to be seen anywhere. And I had done a talk with them in October. And after I had left, just before Christmas, all the children in the classroom that I talked to had gone missing. At home time, none of them were in the playground. Their parents couldn't find them, the teacher couldn't find them. So they started searching the school, and they found them all huddled in the top assembly hall in the corner. They were hiding behind the really big, the play mats that they use for PE. They were hiding behind there and having a secret meeting. The teachers and the parents were asking them, what is this secret meeting about? And they said, we can't tell you, you'll find out after Christmas. So they all went home for Christmas, and on the first day after New Year's break was over, they handed in a box to the teacher. The teacher opened up the box, and what each of them had gone and done was write a letter to the Prime Minister demanding for them, for the government to open up the gates. And the teacher wrote in saying, now, I didn't tell the kids to do this, that nobody's told them to go and do this. They've done their research, so they came back with facts and figures. One had even put a business case together as to why refugees could help the British economy. These are 7 or 8-year-olds I'm talking about. And she said, please, can we get this? Can we get these letters? Can we do something important with them? And now luckily ALFDUBS, as you know, is open to getting the message out however possible. So who's very kindly said, yes, I'll help you get these letters into Parliament, and that we'll get them to the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister, of course, was Theresa May at the time. So I'm just going to read you one of the letters that was written by this amazing, phenomenal group of little 7 and 8-year-olds. This is from Hannah Spicer. Dear Prime Minister, I'm writing to you today about refugees. I'm so devastated that you won't let any more refugees into our country. Refugees are risking their lives to get to safety. Imagine how they feel when their family has been bombed in Syria. I'm reading the boy at the back of the class, and there's a boy called Ahmed in it who's trying to find his parents, but the guards are closing the gates in 9 days. Refugees are forced to pay smugglers and put themselves in danger. Less than 1% of the world's refugees have been allowed to settle anywhere, and we have been useless and utterly ridiculous in letting anyone get any help. People have to risk their lives. Over 8,000 people have been found dead or missing, and of course that number, I don't know where she got that from, but it's much higher. And you keep promising £150 million public money, but where is that money going? 11 million people have run away from Syria, and we've only taken in a few thousand, and I don't even think that's true. I think that's a lie. You're lying to us. Please help refugees, and please save their lives. I appreciate you taking your time reading this letter, and I hope you agree with me. So that was by 7-year-old Hannah Spicer. And I just want to read this last one by Eva. She's from the same classroom. Dear Prime Minister, I'm writing to you because of refugees. How many refugees have you let in this year? Please let me know. Thank you very much. So these phenomenal kids are growing up in a world where they are inundated with. So sad that we're looking to our children to solve all of the problems that they're seeing right now. I do talk about Greta. I talk about how the mobilisation of future voters matters to governments, that their letters matter, their words and questions matter, and that they have every right to take their Tintin-esque questions as far as possible. And it is really beautiful to see that they are ready and that they are able to do these things. They feel empowered enough to do these things, especially when they have a teacher or a parent or a grandparent who wants to help them do this. And I think that what we have to remember, all of us in our works, no matter how isolated we might feel by the media, by the politicians that we're trying to change, that we remember there are generations coming up behind us who want to help us as much as possible. So please use them. Please go out and find them and help them do what they want to do, which is to help these people who they recognise as human beings. And you all know that children don't care about the colour of people's skin. They just see a human being in front of them who might be a friend that that needs help. So we have a huge, beautiful chance here to mobilise an army of hearts that will grow up to perhaps give us solutions that we're not thinking of, or that we are too blinkered to come up with ourselves because of our own biases or because of our own experiences. So just remember that, and I want to thank you all for being here and for listening to me waffle on, and for supporting the book if you've been reading it as Diana has and been gifting it. But yeah, just know that our kids are ready and they're waiting for us to tell them how to help us. That's it. Thank you.